So in this session, we are going to focus on file handling in Python. In the previous sessions and the preceding classes, you have already seen and witnessed the concepts of precision making, loops, exception handling, and modules. But all the while, when you are programming or you are solving any problem statement, what you are doing is you are creating the data by yourself, isn't it? Either you were creating the data by yourself by hard coding, or you were asking the data from the user to to provide, right? Something like this. If I want uh, the address of the user, probably I'll create a variable, and maybe I'll ask via the input function from the user to provide the address, isn't it? And whatever the user is providing uh, through the keyboard, the input function picks it up and stores in the address variable, or not just the address, for that matter, be it integer or be it a string or float, any kind of values we had been asking the user. If not prompting the user to provide, then what we were doing is we were hard coding it, something like this, isn't it? Or if it was a textual statement, this is how we had been doing, right? And all the analysis that we were to do, we would be doing on these variables which are written like this, correct? But in this session, we are going to learn what a file handling is. In a very layman's term, file handling is nothing but the whole process of handling the file, whether it's the process of reading a file from a computer or writing a file. So why would you need to read a file or write a file? It's because it's not always that user will be providing a data. It's not always that you will have the data readily available with you. Sometimes the data is stored in a different file, maybe in a text file, maybe in some other file format. You may have to read that file from a folder in your computer and process that data. Okay. For example, uh, uh, in different industries, sometimes the data is maintained in a Excel file, sometimes it is maintained in a text file. Then how do you reach out to that file and read that file and get the data in your Python environment? And why in the Python environment? Because once you have that data from the file, you can always process it, right? So this is the whole process of the ability of your Python program to read, write, and manipulate files on your computer. This is something called as file handling. So in today's session, we are going to learn how to handle a file. Okay, let me create a file for myself. Maybe I'll create this as student details. Okay. Okay. So you can see that I just created a text file, student details.txt, right? If I double click it, it's open here in the um, notepad. Let me write some data here. For example, to start with, I can write Aditya Sharma. Okay. And space, I may write his age as 31. I may go as Michael Choffs. His age may be 35. I write Prachi Sharma. Age could be 25. This is the data. Okay. Not necessarily the data could be this structure. It could be a long paragraphs. It could be a very huge file. It could be, the file length or the number of pages or, number of characters could be running in the millions and billions, but I don't care. I just know that I have a data, or there is a data which is uh, present in a text file, and that text file is saved here, right? which goes by the name student details.txt. All right. So how do we read that file? Remember, when I was creating a list or I was creating a dictionary, how would I do that? I would write something like this, isn't it? Uh, this was one of the ways. The other way was to go by square brackets, correct? So what this was doing is this was creating for you a list object, okay? And just like you had the list object, and over that list variable, you were able to operate on, correct, using the functions or methods that were associated with respect to list. For example, append. Yeah, this is very specific to list. Had it been string data like this, then you had the string methods like replace. Okay, you could replace states with county. Okay, something like this. So these methods were very specific to that kind of data, isn't it? In a similar way, when it comes to file handling, you need to create a variable that is a file object. How do you do that? Let me create a variable my file. Okay, so my file is a variable which is going to be a file object. Now, how do you open a file? Ideally, you double click and open a file, right? If it is your manual process. But when it comes to Python, how do you open? You have a function called as open. Okay, so open is a function just like you have too many functions, like you have print functions in your Python, you have input functions in your Python, you have length function. In a similar way, you have open function which lets you open the file. Okay, what is the syntax of open? So of course you're calling a function. This particular will attempt opening a file, but what file? What parameters do you give? So the very first parameter that you're going to give is the file name. Okay, and the second parameter that you're going to give is the mode. What is file name? So basically you are supposed to give the path of your file like this. Okay, remember, if the text file is existing at the same location as your Jupyter notebook, or the same location wherever maybe if you're writing this code in a different .py, the Python file, then wherever that file is located, or wherever this Jupyter notebook is located, if this file is existing in the same folder, you can always give only the file name. But suppose it is existing somewhere else, then please prefer to give the complete absolute path of the file. And what is mode? So mode is basically you're opening a file, but with what purpose? Are you opening it for the read mode? You're opening for a write? You're opening for append? So there are certain modes. You have modes like, in Python, you have modes like R, you have W, you have A, you have W plus, etc. Okay, let's try to go by just RWA for the moment. Okay, remember, R mode is read mode. That means if you intend to open the file only for reading purpose and you don't want to risk that we should manipulate the data, or by mistake uh, uh, create a loss of the data, or end up erasing the file, you better open the file with read mode. Okay, so you are supposed to give that character read. Okay, so this open function expects two strings. One is what file name and what mode you're opening. And once you have opened this, if I print just the file name, you will see that a file variable has been created. Okay, don't worry if you don't understand what is this, but like I explained you in the previous example, if you create a list variable, you had the functions associated with the list to operate on the list, like list.append, .insert, .extend, etc. Correct? In the same way, you have the file uh, functions. Few of them we are going to discuss, like I have opened the file. Now what? How do I read the data? So I am creating a file, a variable which goes by the name data in file. Okay. Okay. Then I am going to write my file dot read. You can see that on this variable, I am calling this particular method dot read. Okay. If I now print this particular variable here, you will see that the whole data has been fetched for me, isn't it? In a similar way, so this basically read method reads all the contents of the file as a single string. Okay, so what happens is whatever this file was, how much ever the data, whether it's so much of the data or even if I duplicate the data so much, it doesn't matter. The complete data shall be read as a single string. Okay, so it is going to be read as a single string. You can see this. If you want to see what is the length of this data, I'm going to calculate the length here, and you see it says 67. That means there are 67 characters. If I want to know what is the type of this data, you will see that it's a string. Okay, so what happens is through read, you're reading the complete file as a single string, and that gets stored here in this particular variable. Okay, that is one way. Now let me comment out this one, and let me introduce to you another method that is called as read line. Mind you, it's singular. Read line. Line is singular. Okay, if I run this piece of code and if I print what is, let's see, what is stored in data in file, if I run this, you will see that it is reading only the one line, correct? But if I give 2 here, it is only reading the 2 characters. Okay, if I give 80, then it is going to read first 80 characters. If I give 30 here, then it's going to read the first 30 characters. Look at this. Okay, maybe I should give a little more, 50. Okay, if I give 80, apart from this, you have one more method, and that is read lines. Remember, now I have made it plural. Now what happens is your complete file will be read, but this complete file will be read as a single lines, and each of these single lines will be stored as a list. So you, this particular data, with this particular variable which had the data earlier as a string, complete string, but this time it is going to be a list, and each element in the list is going to be the each lines. You can see here, right? This time it is all list. So why? Because I use the function read lines. This is plural here, so each lines is read and it is stored as individual elements in the list. This slash, and this slash is nothing but it's kind of a hidden character which you don't see generally here. If I show you the hidden characters, you can see that there's something called as carriage return, which is nothing but it's a new line, so which indicates that the next line is starting here. You don't see this character, but because that hidden character is present, that's why the next line is present in the new line. Okay, and that is why you're seeing this. Fine. So this is one way. The other way in which you can read this line is maybe you can go around using for loop. For example, I can say for line in my file. This is also one way wherein you can access each line one by one. So if I print here, print this line is, let me write this particular message and then print the line, and you will see that I'm going to iterate on each lines and print this one. Look at this. Got it? Now the whole purpose here I want to focus on is I have been able to open a file, and because I'm opening in the read mode, I have been able to read file in different styles, whether I want to read it as a single string, whether I want to read it as a list with each element being different lines, or I can read one by one also, correct? And I can do operations also. Operations as in, for example, if I suddenly tell you that the problem statement is I want to calculate how many total vowels are there. Okay, or maybe I can say how many small a. That means a being small case. How many such small a are there? If I have to count, then what I'm going to do is, let me read this, and here I am going to print dot count small a. Okay, and if I run this, you see it says 9. So there are 9 small case. So like that, you can search for how many words are there, how many vowels are there. You can do all kind of operations having read the file. And it is not just this. If it is a useful data, you can also do the data analytics. Now this was all about reading a file. Now let's see, how do you write in a file. So just like you had read here, now what I'm going to do is, I'm going to change the operation. I'm going to write it to W. Now remember, what happens in W is, I'm opening a file in write mode. And remember, if this file is already existing with some data or without some data, then opening in a W immediately cleans off the or wipes off all the data in this particular file, and cursor is placed at the beginning, so that whatever you are going to write, you are able to write from beginning. So you have to use W mode with a high caution, because if you have a sensitive data or a data which is valuable and you suddenly open it in W mode, you end up losing the whole data immediately, right? So only if you're sure that you need to erase the complete data and write from the beginning in this file, then you open in the W mode. And in case you want to append the data, that means you want to retain the previous data that was existing already, and over that you want to continue writing in that same file from bottom, then you better consider to open this file in A mode. A mode is nothing but it's a append mode. All right. Now let me open in W mode and show you that if I write my file dot write, just like I had read, in write also I can put a single string. For example, this is a sample string that is being written. Okay, so this is a single text, or this is a single string which is being written in the file. I can write it. Okay, now let me open that file here. It's asking me to reload. Yes, and you can see that. Okay, hold on, right, and then maybe I should close it. This is a good practice to always close the file once you have written it, and you can see that this is written, right? If I want to write something again, so after some time, say suppose I want to write numbers from 1 to 100, what I'm going to do, I'm going to run a loop for number in range, say 1 to 100. I'm going to do is my file dot write, okay, number. Okay, this is something important that I need to tell you. If you're trying to write something in a file, it should always be a string. Okay, you cannot write other data types. Okay, so let me convert this into string before attempting to write it in a file. And I run this, let me reload it, and you can see that all the numbers are printed here, right? If I want to print line after line, then what I'm going to do is, the moment I write this number here, I'm going to also add new line character like this. So this is one string, add to that string this slash n, which is new line. And if I run this now and I go back here, and you can see that all the numbers are printed like this. Got it? If I want to add a message here, the number is, and then let me add this here. If I run this now, and you shall see that it's printed like this, right? So why would you want to write any content in a file? So sometimes you may want to create a software wherein the output, you don't want to print the output on a screen. Rather, you want to preserve that output. You have done a data analytics and you want to output it in a file. You can do like this. Okay. If you want to generate an automated messages on automated logs, what's happening in a software. You can always create such files through the software which has all the messages written in it for the later reference and also for the longer preservations. Okay, now write, what write does is my file.write, this write function is taking only one string, a collective string, and it is writing in a file. But what if I had to write too many lines together? Or maybe I can say if I have a list, for example, data equals to maybe India, America, and China, Japan, Germany, like this. If I want to write this, I mean, although I have written small words, but imagine that you have too many strings which are stored in a list, and I want to dump this whole list in a file, considering that each element is a single line. Just the way I read from the file using read lines function, and it was giving me all the lines as a list, right? So I can, this time I'm going the other way around, from the list to the file. So I am going to use the function file, my file dot write lines. Just like you had read lines, this is write lines. And within the write lines, I'm going to push this particular variable and I'm going to run this off. Okay, and if I see here, you will see that everything is printed. In case I want to have it in separate line, maybe what I can do here is I can put this escape, the new line character here at the end, like this, then run it, and you will see that everything is printed in different lines, right? So this is how it works. So basically you have to read the data or to write the data. You have certain methods, but before you go about reading the data or writing data, first you have to, the very first step is going to be open the file. Okay, open the file in appropriate mode. Okay, now whether that is R mode, W mode, or A mode, or R plus mode, W plus mode, or A plus mode. See, there are different modes. What are these? I'm going to provide you in the notes, but for now you can just remember that R is for exclusively reading, only reading. No write operation is permitted. And W mode is for writing. Okay, any existing data shall be wiped off and you start writing afresh. Okay, and if the file is not existing, then that file shall be created for you and you will be able to write. A means file has to exist, and whatever data is there, you will start writing in continuation of the data. You don't lose the data. Okay, that's how it is. And to read the data, after opening the file, you of course you create that file object, and you can use the functions like .read that reads the complete uh, complete file as a single string. You have read line, you have read lines to read everything as a single list, and then you have something called as write, and you have write lines. Okay, what they individually do, I have put it in the notes, corresponding sessions notes. All right, we just used it. This is to read complete data as a single string. This is to read by the character counts. This is to read all the lines as a different elements in a same list. This is to write one string at a time in a list, and this is to write one string in a file, and this is to write a list whose each element is considered as a single line into a file altogether. Okay, so that's how it is used. So file handling is one of the important concept and very useful concept in a Python. Uh, it is not just the text file, but if you have the file of other format, you can give the path to it and you can read it. It could be JSON file, text file, HTML file. You can read a lot of file formats. Just read it in a right format and get the data from the outside world into the Python environment. Do the data analytics, and if you need be, you can also push your all the analysis or the output back into a file. Okay, and you can always come back and open that file. Okay, the output and everything, the whole content will be there. All right. Yeah, that's all about file handling as a concept in Python.